All right, continuing with the digital caricature, the digital painting, I'm to my fourth face. And remember to zoom in on your reference. I stay on the paintbrush tool. I don't vary from that, but I can use Command plus and minus to zoom in, to zoom out. I can use the space bar and click and drag to move around. Same thing here. Command plus to zoom in. All of that. But first I want to see how it kind of fits in with the scheme of things. And so that's my flat color layer. It's on top of my sketch layer. Notice how without that sketch layer underneath, there's a lot of white space just left. So that's what's nice about having a sketch layer. It helps get rid of all those extra whites, which is the first goal. Okay, now I have his face, right? And then I mapped it using the realistic facial template that we went over at the beginning. It's a little different around the mouth for kids because their jaws aren't fully spaced like an adult's. And then I warped it a little bit. I brought it up, made it look a little bit longer, a little bit more egg-shaped, and then played with it even more to do this, to fill in this area. So what do I do now? Well, I can take the sketch layer, circle around this rough sketch I did of him, and I'm going to stretch that, distort that using what I've learned in compositing. Line his eyes up with my sketch, with the basic shapes. Yeah, that works pretty well. Broaden his face a little bit. Good. So now I have that as my under painting. I'm going to keep this on just so I can see it clearly, but I don't want to also see it across his brother because I want to see his brother cleanly. So I can take it and just grab the sketch, the caricature sketch outline of the head, duplicate it on its own. Whoops, make sure I'm on the right layer there. Duplicate it on its own, and then erase it from the layer underneath. So that way, I can turn it off on the brother, but leave it on the youngest. Okay, so now I'm ready for flat color. Kind of this still 100% opaque brush, fairly large, maybe not quite so large. That's pressure sensitive for size. Remember your brush presets. And also rotates as I do it, has an angle jitter that I can actually control with my pin tilt if I want to, because of the type of stylus I have. So it gives me something that looks very much like a pastel kind of under painting. And now I start shaping this face. So I'll zoom in, see a little bit of how I did his brother. Can steal colors from anywhere because I have my dropper tool set for the current, to sample from the current layer and below, right? And everything below would be the sketch layers as well. So I could steal from here and use that color for the shadows. Brothers often have similar coloring. And I'll do kind of big shapes first. His cheeks are not quite as red as his brother's. Kind of broad strokes. Remember, my brush feathers a little bit, so even though I'm using it at 100%, right at the edges it will actually act to blend a little, especially if I use kind of bolder tones. You see at the edges there? And then after I'm done with this flat color, I get to go in with duotone kind of painting at lower opacities. over the top. I might even change my brush at that point to be sensitive, pressure sensitive to opacity to finish it off, even though I would lose the size distinction at that point. Nostrils. I'm going to go a little bit smaller with the brush so I can now get into some details. Let's get around the ears, which I never really defined. Ears on little kids are lots of fun. Get into the eyes and the exact placement. Again, red is pretty good for eyes unless you want to show a lot of makeup around the eye. And he doesn't have a lot of makeup. Probably doesn't have any makeup. That helps contain it. That allows me to paint in some of the whites of his eyes. Remember, you can also steal directly from your source, and you'll be surprised at how they're not as bright, right? But then often with caricatures, you exaggerate the brightness a little bit. You want to look not just at the opening of the eye. This is a very almond-shaped eye. It's got a little bit more of the pinch at the end, like his mother has. But you also want to look at the folds around the eyes. Try not to go too dark here at the edges. The shape of the folds around the eye do a lot for likeness as well. Okay, and then once I feel like I've kind of cemented in some of these sketch shapes, I can get rid of these guidelines. The mouth, that's another place. Doing a little too dark here first. And I'll build the highlight on the lower lip. Top of that. And the teeth. Now we can see both of his teeth, so I'm going to have a shadow in between. Let's see, is there a color I can use? Maybe right there. It's very subtle. And you want to get these placements right. It's all about placement, not detail. How much space is there? What is the shape of that nose? Is it upturned? Is it downturned? How big is the ball of the nose? How wide apart are the nostrils? These are the things that matter. Delicate measurements that give us the appearance of likeness. It's more forgiving on animals. But still, to get a certain breed of dog to communicate, you need to get all those proportions. You need to observe them correctly. You can make fun of them, as they do in kind of animated characterizations of dogs, different breeds. But you're playing up on established proportions. You're not deviating from that. Let's see. Remember, you can store colors that you use frequently. Some interesting colors here I can use. Let's see. And you want to be pretty bold. There we go. I think this will be a good one. Yeah. As you've done more and more faces, you get used to kind of what appears too dark, what appears too light, what the right balance is of color and value in your value scale. I also can use just painting white to kind of carve in the side of his jaw, carve in the background behind him, carve in the shape of his haircut. Still have more to do on his ear. His ears are very prominent, so they're going to give me a lot of his likeness as well. Just how they catch light, where there's shadows. He actually doesn't have much shadow in his ear. It's pretty subtle. I like how his hair kind of goes over his ear a little bit. I can play with that shape. Then his eyebrows. Very open expression. Not too dark. And his other eye. Kind of shape around the iris and pupil. So it feels like eye contact is being made, even if it's subtle. There's a lot to do with where the highlight is as well. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that on his mom while I have a highlight color selected. Remember, this is all just the flat color underneath. We'll modify it again. All right. It needs to go a little bit longer. Also notice where the eyelid overlaps with the iris. You know, the shape of the whites of the eyes. You'll not see white all the way around the iris. It just doesn't happen. But eyes that feel kind of squinty, you're going to see less of the iris. And his iris, which is the colored part of the eye, the muscles around the pupil, they're a lot, they feel proportionally bigger than in adults because kids' eyes grow at a slightly slower rate than the rest of their head. Since eyes are so complicated, they take a long time to form and they grow slowly. A little bit more control of the brush. So I can shape this. This is still flat color, it's not final detail. This helps me kind of know where the battles are that need to happen. And you don't only get creases and shadows around the eyes, you also get highlights. want something even oranger than this.